Marvel Cosmic Invasion, released December of 2025. Available on all modern platforms, retailing for $29.99. This is a 2D beat-em-up, taking place in some version of the Marvel Universe, and setting it apart from other contemporary beat-em-ups is the fact you choose two characters, which you can freely switch between, giving you two special attacks, two different sets of moves, and of course, two separate health bars. And this beat-em-up is trying to capture the feeling of a big annual crossover event. In this case, classic Marvel big bad Annihilus is proving to be a threat not just to Earth, but to much of the galaxy. And by the end of this game, you'll have a roster of 15 characters that have come together to stop Annihilus. And they are a rather diverse range of characters, as you have very popular characters like Iron Man and Spider-Man, or the X-Men characters here, but you also have more obscure characters like Beta Ray Bill, or Phyla Vell, and frequently characters will serve as bosses of stages before becoming playable themselves. And the reasoning behind this is that Annihilus is using some kind of mind control parasite, and this large roster of characters does not go to waste, as each stage of the campaign mode has challenges for two specific characters, and the story of the stage is very much set up for those characters, which does very much sell the idea of a crossover event, as each stage has its own small story that all feeds into the larger narrative. And much like in an actual comic crossover event, sometimes the character pairings make a great deal of sense, sometimes they seem to come out of nowhere. She-Hulk and Spider-Man teaming up? Well, that has happened a lot, I could see that. Jean Grey as the Phoenix teaming up with Beta Ray Bill? Well, there's a very strange and very powerful combo. But having two characters works out well, as generally the characters you have 4 levels are well balanced, being strong in different areas. And each character is somewhat unique, and gets more unique as they level up, as each character does unlock a passive skill at a certain point, and that can radically change how you use that character, like Spider-Man's web shooters reloading every time he dodges. But even at the very beginning, when characters are at level 1, they are still distinct from one another. And at the very least, there is 2 broad categories of characters. Characters which can fly, and characters which cannot. But even within that, there are characters that are sort of in the middle. Spider-Man definitely can't fly, but because of his web shooting abilities, he has a lot more mobility in air than the other non-flying characters. But you could divide the characters into categories in other ways. Characters that block versus dodge, or have defensive special moves versus offensive special moves. And that's a whole other thing. Every character has a rather large list of moves they can do. And so far as I can tell, all of these moves are references to something that happened in the comics at one point or another. And all of that shows a great deal of affection for the source material. And that's before you consider all the Easter eggs that are sprinkled throughout stages, some of which characters will comment on, some of which are just there for you to notice. It was overall a pretty good experience, but I did have one recurring issue with this game, and that was the difficulty curve, or possibly lack thereof, because honestly the game didn't seem to get that much more difficult as you played. Most of the levels were easy to complete with only one try. However, every 2 or 3 stages, I would hit a wall, and find myself having to replay that stage over and over again before I could finally beat it, and then I'd find myself having no troubles with the next couple of levels. And truthfully, there's nothing wrong with a level being difficult, but it did lead to some of my character roster being wildly over-leveled compared to other characters. For example, this stage that paired up Venom and Black Panther, it sees us fighting mini-symbiotes. And it also took me about 10 tries before it was finally over. But when I look back and try to figure out what about this stage was so difficult, and it ultimately all comes down to the boss fights, as essentially every boss you encounter has their own gimmick. And the problem is, not all of these gimmicks are created equal, and most of the bosses have a logical and rather obvious counter to their gimmick. Not all of them do. Some of the gimmicks are literally just busy work during the fight, like when you're fighting Null. You have to destroy several other things in the room before you can damage him. Then after you do some damage to him, they respawn, and you repeat the process. And while this is going on, he's still attacking you, so you'll need to do some defense. And little minor enemies are spawning, to be annoying. Though, in fairness, almost all of the bosses summon minor enemies. And they only truly become an issue when you have to do some busy work on top of them. And as this kept happening in different stages over the course of the game, at a certain point I did start using alternate characters to try and beat a stage. Only to still find myself having the same trouble. And it's odd that the actual stages themselves don't really get more difficult. There are different types of enemies on different stages, though a lot of them are just filling the same role but with a different graphic. Health pickup seem to be about the same between your various levels. And if you're wondering exactly what the challenges and stages for characters unlock, they let you unlock things in this grid here. You can get a number of things here: alternate costumes, music tracks, character bios, although I kinda think if you're inclined to play a Marvel beat-em-up, you probably already know the character bios for most everyone here. Although, if you're really a fan of Marvel Comics, you might still get a kick out of all of this stuff. It's all optional, and it's all clearly aimed at a very particular kind of fan. So is Marvel Cosmic Invasion worth your time and money? Well, it is a quality beat-em-up, with both great mechanics and a fantastic art style. The kind of thing there definitely would have been a line to play in the arcade back in the day. If you're playing the campaign, you can go back and play any stage you want, with any characters you want, at any time. And if you're disinclined to play the campaign and want a more arcadey experience, you can also play the arcade mode, where you pick 2 characters and just keep playing until you can't anymore. And both are fine options that scratch different itches. And honestly, the idea that you always have 2 characters that you can freely switch between is a nice and somewhat novel idea. Which also makes the game seem somewhat easier, as you at the very least have 2 complete health bars to work through in any level. Though, whether the game is actually easier, or if this is just a psychological trick, I'll leave up to you. Though at the very least, it does set it apart from some of the other quality beat-em-ups that have been released in recent years. As in recent memory, there have been some absolutely fantastic beat-em-ups that have come out. And the 2-character gimmick does do something to stand apart from its competition from something like Streets of Rage 4, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Shredder's Revenge. Though I will say I think the price tag is a little high for what you're getting. $30 is not entirely unreasonable, but I think this game would have been better suited to be $25, if not $20. But having said that, I don't think this is something you'll regret buying at $30. So yes, I absolutely do recommend Marvel Cosmic Invasion. And I am somewhat curious to see if there will be any kind of DLC expansion in the near future. But only time will tell. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.